Week 2 of NWBA Season 6, teams looking to garner some momentum after feeling each other out in the first week of the season. Undella and Turnback, which 1 and 2 team looks to reverse their fortune and get back to 500 on Versus Seeker. Kasparov and Hart home while he talks a big game, but how would he perform in his first match under the primetime lights? Both Blades and Critical trying to parlay their fantastic week 1 to another undefeated week, but would they stumble with the roadblocks in their way or keep cruising to chase the record? All those sets in the first trade of the season coming up. Wonder Room starts now. Wonder Room is brought to you in part by Booze Mobile and by Kurtz's Chicken. And now for your host, King Vasser. Hi everybody and welcome back to Wonder Room. We are now 2 weeks into the season and we're starting to see some separation between teams, finding out who's really the cream of the crop and finding out who is gonna struggle later on down the season. As well as some teams that find themselves in a weird in-between spot. We had a team that we thought was a contender lose all their games this week. We saw some other teams pull off 4-0 weeks. So standings are starting to get really interesting as we head into the meat of the season. There's been a bit of a shakeup over in the Ruby League. Trivial Pursuit no longer finds themselves at the top of the leaderboard after a 2-2 week. Still played very well and still has one of the best win diffs in the league, but they now find themselves in 3rd place behind both Legacy and Hart Home, who pulled off a perfect 4-0 week and thus hold the top 2 spots in the Ruby League. Blackthorn had themselves a solid week as well, now sits at 4-2-1, unfortunately had to accept the draw against Turnback, but still has a pretty comfortable lead at that 4th place spot. Snowpoint had a 2-2 week, thus finding themselves in 5th. Fortunately for Turnback, that draw actually puts him now at 6th place, but still pretty rough sledding for Wheezy thus far to start the season. Kitakami and Sicily both had pretty rough weeks, so they find themselves at 7th and 8th. But in the case of Sicily, finally got their first win of the season, so that ensures that nobody is still looking for their first win this late into the season. Over in the Sapphire side of things, we have a lot more shakeup. Fuchsia City still remains at the top. They had a pretty solid 3-1 week. They now sit at 6-1. Snowbell City also had a pretty good week. They are now the sole 2nd place team at 5-2. Undella also had a good 3-1 week. So now Audi has moved all the way up to 3, now has a positive record on the season. And then sitting at 3-4, 3 teams moving in vastly different directions. DreamYard kind of just treading water, had a 2-2 week, so they are still hovering around 500. Moss Deep, surprisingly 3-1, including a massive upset win over Trivial Pursuit, probably the biggest upset on the season thus far. And then Lava Ridge Town, moving in the absolute opposite direction of Moss Deep, went 0-4 this week, so now instead of contending for the league lead with Fuchsia City, now find themselves just trying to claw back into getting above 500. And speaking of teams on the downturn, Kasparov and Corway both also suffering winless weeks, so they bring up the rear, both sitting at 1-6. And now for this week's power rankings, we have a brand new number 1, that going to Legacy following their perfect week. Hart Home right behind them at number 2, also with that 4-0 week. Fuchsia City, unfortunately, just by virtue of not having as strong of a week as the first 2 teams, drops to 3, but they are still in a very great position considering that they are the top of Sapphire League right now. Snowball City moves up to 4, Pursuit drops down to 5, but still a very good place to be in at this point in the season. Blackthorn and Undella move up some spots, Undella in particular making a big leap up to 6-7. DreamYard holding firm, remaining in 8th place. Moss Deep making the massive jump all the way up to 9, and Snowpoint moving up pretty largely as well, up to 10. Turnback drops to 11, Lava Ridge Town drops massively all the way down to 12. Kitakami, just by virtue of not having as bad of a week as some of the other cellar dwellers, moves up to 13. Kasparov drops majorly down to 14. Sicily holds firm at 15, and Koroway now sitting all the way in last place. The most interesting part of the middle of the season is that you get to see interleague matchups. Teams that are only going to play each other once. You don't have to worry about the ban rule screwing up your game plan later on down the season. And more often than not, you get some really interesting clash of styles that you wouldn't otherwise see between teams during the season. And as such, in this week's highlight section, you're going to see 3 separate matches between teams that are only going to meet this one time, as well as a pretty high-profile Ruby League match. Wheezy had a pretty bad week 1, but he has a chance to turn around against Undella, and a big matchup against Pursuit, who went 3-0 in the first week. Elsewhere, you've got Keg and Ball Heat on Primetime. Who would pass the supposed dog check and look to really get their season going in this second week? And then a big matchup between Fuchsia City and Blackthorn, between two teams looking to establish themselves as real contenders following strong week 1s. First matchup of the week, Undella versus Turnback, both teams sitting at 1-2, already sitting at kind of a crucial juncture on the season. So, out the gate, Grafai knocks the Garchomp, reveals that it's Rocky Helmet. Normally this wouldn't be that big a deal, we've seen defensive chomp all the time. Except this is SD scale shot, so no loaded dice, instead Rocky Helmet. Odd set building here from Audi. Then, later on turn 7, Wheezy gets the double on Gastrodon, Ursaluna is in, presses Facade on the Skarmory, and then reveals it has Fire Punch and gets the burn for good measure. So you know that this thing is going to be a problem down the line. But on turn 11, Audi in a favorable position, Nasty plots up with Thunderous, but goes for the Grass Knot, expecting Ursaluna to block the T-Bolt, and then expecting Gliscor to switch out on the Grass Knot, gets blocked again, and then Toxic. So he has to Terra Ice, go for the Terra Blast, and he gets the kill, but a lot of turns wasted there by Thunderous. But on turn 16, able to read the Grafai switch, gets off an Earth Power, gets a kill. Sacks Skarmory to the rocks. The next turn, Primarina reveals that it's Calm Mind Lefty, so this is going to be a bit of an issue. Thundersea's gonna have to come in, get off a T-Boat, nowhere near killing, but you just gotta get chip on this as it dies to Draining Kiss. Then, on turn 23, Gastrodon comes in on the Hurricane. Wheezy lands both of them. He's known a little bit for missing a lot of Hurricanes. Able to land that one there. Gets hit by the Poltergeist, reveals that this Moltres is Spadef, not Fizzduff, so Sewer Edge, able to get the 2-hit. And then Raikou comes in to clean up with Scald. Something you have to watch out for. Garchomp comes in, gets scalded, doesn't get burned, and from here, it looks like Garchomp's going to be able to clean up EQ to Raikou. That takes it out. Primarina too low, it won't live. Ursaluna able to live the Earthquake, but the Rough Skin is going to do in Ursaluna. Big trade there. Audi gets the first game. Then, on to game 2. Hoopa's the switch. Scarf Shadow Ball, yes sir. 2 quick ones on Skarmory, and it goes down. Then, later on, turn 10, Audi gets a good double. Poltergeist on the Primarina doesn't get the kill. Wheezy surprisingly going for the Calm Mind, thought he would switch. And it pays off in a big way for Audi, gets rid of Primarina. And then, SD's on the Ursaluna the next turn, figures I have a Sash. Let's go ahead and get it popping. The Bitter Blade is not going to kill, but it puts Ursaluna in range for the burn chip to do its job. True Ledge goes down to Ursaluna, but True Ledge gets its kill right back. Then later on, Gliscor trying to knock a Gastro without an item. Gastro reveals Ice Beam, Gliscor down, and then Hoopa comes in and reveals it has Energy Ball. So a lot of big data being unveiled. Caesar revenge kills with the Bullet Punch, and then Moltres comes back in. Caesar gets its chip, and then dies to the Flamethrower. But at this point, it's a really favorable position for Audi. Almost impossible for him to lose. T-Bolts Raikou, just because, no need to predict. Goes into Garchomp. Doesn't get burned again by the Scald. Wheezy switches out, and then the sub. The SD, and now it's going to be over. Audi is going to take the set in 2 games. Unless the Scale Shot only gets 2 hits. Wheezy lands another Crucial Hurricane. Garchomp goes down, Thunderous T comes in for the revenge kill, but Scald at this point is a roll. And Wheezy gets it. So, magically,
Wheezy able to call back, brings it to game 3. In that game 3, Ursaluna comes out on the T-Bolt, good swap for Wheezy. Terranormal Facades, no way Skarmory can live 2 of those. 54% on a resist is crazy. But gets a little greedy. Ceruledge comes in, blocks the Facade. Goes for a Bitter Blade, and then Wheezy reveals Trailblaze, which normally would be really interesting, except it activates Ceruledge's weak armor. Ceruledge gets the kill with the Bitter Blade, and then Primarina in on the switch. Audi figures, why not? Let's get up to full so we can pop the Sash. And get some really good tip off on this Primarina. Lands the Poltergeist, it brings Primarina all the way down to 11%. So Ceruledge getting some really good damage off. And then Thunderstee is able to come in, doesn't have to predict, Terra Blast Ice is going to kill. And then Wheezy misses a crucial Focus Blast on the Skarmory. 2 turns later says, we don't need to predict, just go for the Shadow Ball. Then, turn 25, very crucial situation. Gliscor in, Thunderstee goes for the Terra Blast, Hoopa comes in, misses the Focus Blast, and Wheezy just says, no, can't come back from that one. So, his luck turns for the worst at the worst possible moment. Undella picks up the big win, moves to 2-2. Wheezy now sitting at 1-3, his worst start of his career thus far on the season. The second prime time set of the week, Cascaroffa versus Hearthome. There's been some talks. Hearthome feels really confident. Toronto has been backing their boy, and he has an opportunity to prove himself on primetime TV. Able to get up a quick Toxic Spike, and this is going to be the name of the game for this set. The hazards are really going to play a very crucial part for Hearthome. On turn 10, Rotom gets a burn on an Okidogi, and then reveals Rostberry, not even Lum. Balheat not worried about Para. Gets burned eventually, but still does a healthy 47%, and then the Toxic Chain. Rotom in a world of hurt. So Keg has to go into Ditto to try to stop this menace from blowing a hole through his team. And while he's able to lower Okidogi down all the way to 9%, Ditto's not going to get the kill. And Hearthome goes up 6-5 early. But then comes Boots Entei, and this Boots Entei was a real problem for Hearthome to deal with throughout the set. Later on, Sandy Shocks able to get the Volt Switch out, Infernape is in, goes for the Vacuum Wave, but doesn't get the kill. Rotom able to get some big HP back off the Pain Split. So big missed opportunity there for Hearthome. And then Entei comes in on the double. Sacred Fire does 54% to the Clodsire. And this Sacred Fire, not even Bandit, was doing massive work for Hearthome. Cascaroffa would have to play Entei excellently to win, but thus far, it's working. In comes Samurai H, gets off a Ceaseless Edge, and then Foot turns out. The screen's Clefable is back, but he puts up Reflecting to the Light Screen, dies to the Volt Switch. Then Entei comes in, stomping Tantrum on the Infernape, so this thing has disgusting coverage. But then, later on, Enamorous lives the Volt Switch, Draining Kisses the Entei for some chip, dies to another Sacred Fire. Cascaroffa in a really good position, but Rotom comes in, dies to the Razor Shell. Haxorus comes in, and you know this thing is Bandit. Keg likes to run it, goes for the first impression, surprisingly, nowhere near kills Sandy Shocks, and then he sacks the Entei to the Earth-powered. Odd decision, knowing that this thing has extreme speed. In comes Weavile. Hearthome is scared of an Ice Shard. Keg goes for Icicle Crash, and then switches out, so now you know that this thing is choice. But is it Band, or is it Scarf? Haxorus dies to the Razor Shell. Samurai H gets off a Sucker Punch, and then Keg reveals the Low Kick, but then reveals that he's banded. Scarf Shocks gets the kill. Hearthome with the Nail Biter in game 2. In game 1, rather. Game 2. Turn 10. Samurai H in. Big Razor Shell on the Clefable, drops a defense, and then gets a drop defense on Rotom as well. There are already 2 Toxic Spikes set up. Burn doesn't matter. Ceaseless Edge does a healthy 41% and puts on another layer of spikes, and now the hazards are starting to get out of control. Cascaroffa has no control over this, so they're gonna have to deal with all of this on entry. Rotom finally gets the kill on Samurai, but big damage. Later on, Entei's in. Clodsire eats the Stone Edge, but it's not gonna live the Stomping Tantrum. Entei with another big kill, but in comes Shocks. Cascaroffa doesn't really have an answer for this thing, but surprisingly, Balheat goes for the Volt Switch instead of the ground move, but then predicts the ground move right back, and Amorous T is in. Keg has to switch to Entei. Sacred Fire does only 30%, and then gets blown up by an Earth Power on the way in. Weavile comes in, tries to get the kill, goes for the Ice Crash, Infernape lives, and then Keg sacks the Ditto. Some really weird sacks coming in from his side. In comes Clefable, in comes Okie Dokie, and we'll let the live feed tell it from here.
Yo, we talking great right now. Alex, turn the heat up.
That shit is dual screens, wish thunder waves.
Alex,
walking up on this nigga.
Alex, please turn the heat up.
Turn the nigga into a convertible. Alex, wait, hit something.
Alex, please turn the fucking heat up.
Damn it.
Push this little nigga top back. Holy fuck.
Hey, you remember that item, right?
Yo.
Yeah, remember the item, right?
No way!
Nice fucking chest, idiot.
That shit did 8 million!
Toronto stat the fuck up.
That shit did a great million, bro!
Give me some more. I'm kind of healthy.
Earthquake! Yo, Earthquake Earthquake is in a fuck thousand, bro. Oh my god.
Nigga, come here. Oh, that thank you. And you're gonna go under this idiot.
Holy shit, bro.
It's never been.
Nigga.
It's Okie. It's over. It's Okie.
It's over. It's Okie over. Dog check. Pass. Holy shit. Real TV is back.
All he said he was primetime proves it in a masterful way, an emphatic 2-0 victory over Casquaffle, who drops to 1-3. Okie Dokie, the big 5 KOs. Sandy Shocks didn't die once, gets 3 KOs of its own, and Heart Home moves to 3-1. Very good start on the season. Pursuit versus Turnback, Weezy off the heels of that loss to Undella on Versus Seeker, trying to get a big upset over the top team in the Ruby League. So, Pursuit, with the lead you've seen this before, you saw it a lot last season. Weezy switches to Ursaluna and then reveals some really weird sets coming out from Weezy and Mikey so far this season. But Ursaluna is getting its. Gets the big facade off on the Yuxi, but then Mew comes in on the Primarina, it's paralyzed, gets fully parried, and now it's time to go for the setup, and that really was the story of the entire set. Mew terrors into a poison type to not take super effective damage from the Shadow Ball, and after 2 Calm Minds, no way an extra Sentries come anywhere close to killing. Store Power pops, Raikou down. Moltres takes massive damage, the Hurricane doesn't get the Confuse, Mew pops the Citrus Berry, and from there, that's game 1. Just no answer for the setup Mew. And Blades off to a phenomenal start in the set. Then we move to game 2. Weezy Terra Normals on Ursaluna, big damage on the Yuxi before the burn, and then gets the kill after the burn, but Yuxi did its job, got rocks off. Then in comes Iron Treads. Blades, perhaps a bit of a misplay, forgets that Ursa's no longer a ground type, just Ice Spinners, gets popped by the EQ. So then Tornadus comes in and reveals that it has to be Specs because that damage was ridiculous off the Bleak Windstorm. Raikou takes a lot, but resists, gets 80 off the Volt Switch. In comes Reverbroom, and Reverbroom says, you know what? I like what I saw from the Mew last game. Let me get some more of that too. Pops a Shift Gear, Iron Head, gets rid of Tornadus. In comes Iron Crown. Weezy goes for the flinch, doesn't get it. Crown now boosting his defense, and then gets crit by the high horsepower. And so now, Blaze doesn't really have an answer, and especially not after the crit on the Iron Head. Mew goes for the agility, but it's not enough to outspeed Reverbroom, and Weezy emphatically takes game 2 right back. Some really fast and furious action in this set. We move to game 3. Weezy gets a good switch on the treads, it pops rocks, and gets smoked by a Surf from Primarina. Mew takes the opportunity to go for the setup. Primarina, not paired, gets off the flip turn, in comes Ursaluna. Now it has guts, it Terra Normal facades. Blades gets greedy, goes for another Calm Mind, and gets absolutely crunched by the facade. And then the Memento Yuxi, we've seen this often from Nico and Blades last season. It comes in handy here. Weezy has to stay in, try to go for the Earthquake crit, it does not crit. On the Iron Defense from Crowns. And now this thing is getting out of hand again. Terra Fairies goes for the Calm Mind, but Raikou doesn't die. Weezy's trying to get some damage off at the T-Bolt. Doesn't get a pair on either hit, gets Crown all the way down to 8%, but Primarina's gonna live a stored power, so Blades has to swap out, goes to Indeedee, takes 50% from the Surf, And then reveals Scarf healing, which now Crown is back up to full. We have to play this game again. In comes Ursaluna. Tachyon Cutter out from Crown, and it crits. Ursaluna is down. Reverboom, the only chance, has to get a crit gunk shot, and it won't even land. Short Power comes in, crits the Reverboom. That is going to do it for Blades. And this caused quite some controversy from the Peanut Gallery. A lot of people thought that gunk shot had a chance to kill. Blade said this was HP investment. No way it had a shot. At the end of the day, it's not going to matter. Primarina down, Moltres is down, Wheezing D down. Pursuit is going to be able to get away with this one. A 2-1 victory moves to 5-0 on the season, although we know that wouldn't last. A phenomenal start for Blade. Crown and Mew both putting up 6 KOs, Yuxi 7 assists, and even though Ursula and Reverboom did really well for turnback, not enough to get the win. Weezy falls to 1-4. Big time matchup, Fuchsia City versus Blackthorn, two teams with winning records. Fuchsia City comes into this game still undefeated, the final team that is yet to take a loss, but on a bit of a back foot early against Blackthorn, but with the big block on the Volt Switch, able to knock off the Fortress as it gets up rocks. Gyarados comes in, it's not Boots, as Fortress tries to go for counter, and then the Fire Blast from Gyarados. This team, Fuchsia City and Fire Blast, go together like salt and pepper. They have gotten off some big damage with this, but the Zapdos gets the crit on the Specs Hurricane. So Mamoswine goes down. Then Screamtail misses a very big para on the Vaporeon. It flickers out in Ogerpon. And now, Blackthorn can kind of get the party started. Mandibuzz comes in. It's not Boots either. It's Lefties. And it can't take 2 IV Cudgels. It goes down. Then, later on, turn 13, Vaporeon gets off a Wish. Pivots into Zapdos. The rain is out. We already told you this thing was Specs. And it's time to get active. Gyarados tries to terra ground. It's not going to live the Hurricane. It goes down. Then later on, turn 18, Froligator tries to DD in front of the Vaporeon, knowing it's got Water Absorb. Ogerpon comes in. And then Critical forgets that this thing has Water Absorb too. Ogerpon misses the Power Whip, but it's not going to matter. It's going to land the second one on Pelipper, and there is just no answer for Critical. Has to concede the first game. Big dub for Blackthorn out the gate. Then turn 2, all the way on turn 12. Ogerpon SDs on the switch to Wochen. Ivy Cudgel is going to get the kill. In comes Mamo. It takes rock damage. Iso Crash doesn't flinch. It's going to die to an Ivy Cudgel. Things are already really out of hand. Mandibuzz, already told you, it doesn't have boots. It dies to an Ivy Cudgel after the crit. Screamtail gets taunted. And this Ogerpon is just putting in work on this team. Fortunately for Critical, finally misses a Power Whip. Pelipper is going to get the kill with Hurricane, but with the Spec Zapdos in the back, it's not really going to matter. 2 discharges come in, Pelipper down, Froligator down, and just like that, an absurdly massive win for Blackthorn. 2-0 over the last undefeated team in the league, complete domination. Ogerpon, Wellspring, and Zapdos combined for all 12 KOs. Blackthorn now moves above 500 on the season with the big win.
And now, of course, comes our stats section. You know how it goes. Pokemon of the week, leaderboard for the week, ZU moment of the week. Would we see some familiar faces? Would Iron Crown find a way to repeat its week 1 performance? Or would it take a backslide as Mons typically do following a week like that? And would we see a similar situation unfold in this week's ZU moment of the week? As is customary with the weekly stats leaderboard, you're going to see some different faces rotate in and out over the course of the season. For KOs, Enamorous Eye was the workhorse of the week, racking up 15 KOs in a lot of games for Kitakami. Iron Hands, the free agent pickup, puts up big numbers for Sicily, racking up 14, as well as Thunderous T of Undella. King Gambit of Dreamyard puts up 13, and a few Mons tied with 11, including Samrat H and Sandy Shocks of Heart Home, Blastoise of Fuchsia City, and Greninja of Snowpoint. As far as assists, well, did you really think this mom was going to get left off the leaderboard for that long? Yep, the assist king from Season 5 is back to reclaim its throne. Yuxi of Pursuit putting up a monster 16 on the week. Samrat H of Heart Home also puts up 10.
meaning that it's in rarefied double air. We almost never see Amon be able to put up those type of numbers in a single week. So very impressive for Samurai H. Skarmy of Undella puts up 8 assists of its own. Torkoal for Fuchsia City. And then Glamora of Snowpoint and Rotom Wash of Kaskarafa putting up 6. As far as points, Samurai H, all for that double week, led the league with 27. Thunderous T putting up 23, and Amorous I putting up 22. Blastoise of Fuchsia City putting up 22 as well. And then Sandy Shocks and King Gambit putting up 21 each. As far as points per game, Blastoise had an absolutely ridiculous week. Only played 2 games and put up 11 KOs in that game. That's good for 11 points per game on the week. Latias put in big work for Heart Home, racking up 7.5 points per game. Zapdos G for Dreamyard, putting up 6.3. And then Okie Dokie and Samurai H both putting up 4.5 for Heart Home. And then for KOs per game, the aforementioned Blastoise with 5.5, Latias with 4.0, Zapdos with 3, Okie Dokie with 2.5, and then many Mons, including 1/3 of Blackthorn's entire roster, putting up 2 KOs per game. This week's Ruby League Pokemon of the Week goes to Samurai H, and it's hard to argue against it. You saw the numbers all over the leaderboard. 11 KOs, 10 assists, 27 points, 4.5 points per game. I mean, we almost never see a Mon put up a double-double over the course of the week. And if it does happen, it's extremely rare. Maybe something like Diancie with Diamond Storm boosting and Stealth Rocks or something of that nature. But Samurai H put in massive work for Heart Home this week, and so it handily wins the Ruby League Pokemon of the Week for week 2. Steeper competition over on the Sapphire side of things this week, but the award will go to Thunderous T of Undella. 14 KOs and 23 points were both good for second in the league by itself. Really strong week. That Terra Blast Ice really putting in a lot of work. We said it realistically would at the beginning of the season, given how good Thunderous T was for the 20-2 Akala Island Speed Stars in Season 5, and it looks like this is going to be the MVP of Undella as the season progresses. Excited to see just how far this Mon can push it, and hopefully get an all-star bid this time around. This week's ZU Moment of the Week, yet another team building shenanigan going on, and we know that these things happen from time to time. In particular, there are moments where a team will ban a certain Mon, and the other team's like, alright, cool, and then still bring that Mon to the set anyway. It happened multiple times last season. But this might be the first time in league history that a Mon has been banned in a set and then plays all 3 games in that set. As you can see by this image, CJ, GM of Kitakami, bans Masquerada versus Sicily. And Flair is right there to see that message. Not only is Masquerada in game 1, it is in game 2, and it's in game 3. And sure enough, posts 2 KOs and 3 assists during the set, and Kitakami loses. Just absolutely fantastic stuff. Once again, teams making a call, a decision, and then just poof, out of their memory banks. For both teams to pull this off during a set, just absolutely fantastic work. And now for our final wrap-up section, the transactions of the week as well as next week's schedule. Obviously, the second week of interleague play is going to result in some more interesting matchups. And as far as free agents and trade is concerned, things are going to slow down, but that doesn't mean they aren't going to be as impactful as they were last week. After last week's wild surge, you'd figure that this week's free agency was not going to be nearly as extensive, and it wasn't, but there were still some pretty important moves made over the course of the week. Moss Deep opting to continue their roster overhaul, shedding Toxtricity, Charizard, and the mascot Minior, surprisingly, picking up Monkey Dory, Palisand, and Moltres G, so they are still reshaping the roster. But last week was a pretty good week for Moss Deep, so I'm excited to see these new moves come into play. Pursuit opts to get rid of Tatsugiri to pick up like Dusk. Makes sense. They figure more offense is perfectly fine. That's the style that they like to run. and Lycanroc, thus certainly very good offense for the NU tier, especially. Blackthorn opts to get rid of regular Lycanroc after its pretty solid week, and picks up Rhydon for better utility and better defense, makes it a Terra Captain with Stab Ground and non-Stab Water. Turnback gets rid of Defy-Eye, tried to use it in the style of Season 2 Santa-Loon with Liepard, wasn't really working, opts to pick up just more sure defense in Bronzong. Fuchsia C, with perhaps the most surprising moves of the week, gets rid of the mascot Scyther, and gets rid of Gyarados, a really surprising move. Gyarados had already had more than a dozen KOs on the season, close to 30 points. So, kind of similar to how Weird Deer surprisingly got dropped in Season 5, Gyarados gets dropped in Week 2 of this season. Articuno is selected to replace Scyther with Terras in Ice and Steel as a captain, and then Kingdra in Terras with Water and Flying. Makes sense. Gyarados is surprising as a release, and then you think about the idea that Kingdra is going to fit more in the actual Rain offense than Gyarados is. Stab Water is obviously going to make the Hydro Pumps and such hit very hard, and the Flying type non-stab is really good for the Hurricanes. So again, on paper, it seems kind of crazy to get rid of Gyarados, but for the style of this team, I think it makes a ton of sense to pick up Kingdra. And then lastly, Sicily getting rid of Zoroark H wasn't really able to find an avenue to make that bond work. We know that Zoroark H is very tricky to run, so not that surprising that it eventually got dropped. And picks up Pheasantipity, makes it a Terra Captain with Stab in Ferry and non-Stab in Flying, which means that despite the fact that none of them were drafted, all of the loyal 3 are now rostered in Season 6. But as we mentioned earlier, those were not the only transactions made this week. Yes, we finally get a trade in Season 6. Just a straight up 1-for-1 trade. Fuchsia City trades Tyranitar to Undella in exchange for Como. I like this move for both teams. Obviously, Undella has Garchomp on the roster, and so Garchomp and Como kind of want to do the same things. They're both very multifaceted in what they can do, whether, you can be defensive or they can be setup sweepers. Garchomp getting more playing time than Como to start the season, so Undella figures we don't really need another bulky-ish, offensive-ish Dragon-type one on the roster. Fuchsia City says, hey, we'll take him because we're not going to bring Tyranitar often at all, considering that they are running either Sun or Rain, more particularly Rain. T-Tar doesn't really have a spot on the roster. They tried with the AV Sandstream set, but Sand isn't really what this roster's cut out to do. So they send it over to Undella, where hopefully it will be able to make a little bit more of an impact. And as we look ahead to the Week 3 schedule, another round of interleague matchups. Heart Home and Snowball City both have to play Fuchsia City, Undella, and Pursuit. So both of them are in a very interesting spot. Could make some really good ground in their respective leagues to stay at the top of the standings, or they could stumble a little bit with such a difficult schedule. Obviously, we got some other pretty good hard-hitting matchups. You got Legacy and Blackthorn. And for tonight's Versus Seeker, you got a triple header. An interleague matchup between Sicily and Lava Ridge Town. We'll see if the Magmars can't bounce back from their disastrous Week 2. We have a Ruby League matchup between Kidakami and Blackthorn. Kidakami and CJ kind of in the same situation. They're trying to bounce back from a very bad Week 2. And then, maybe the most interesting matchup on the schedule thus far, Koroway and Kaskarafa, which, as far as we're concerned, is the first true tank bowl of the season. Both teams sitting at 1-6. This could go a long way in determining who has to play in that relegation match. So that will be a very interesting matchup for sure to look out for. All right, and that's going to wrap things up for this week's episode. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. Stick around. We've got that Versus Seeker triple header with that big Sapphire League matchup as the headliner. Don't go anywhere. Versus Seeker up next.